My aunt faked being broke and asked me for $10,000. Then I found out she bought a new house. She said, "It's none of your business." What I did next shocked everyone. Story 1. It started about a year ago when my Aunt Clorinda, my dad's youngest sister, pulled off the most manipulative stunt I've ever experienced in my life. Clorinda has always been the black sheep of the family. You know the type, she's always had a flair for drama, a knack for bad decisions, and a tendency to leave chaos in her wake. But this time, she outdid herself. She didn't just screw up her own life, she dragged me into it. I'm 35, single, and live in Austin, Texas. I run a small graphic design business. I wouldn't call myself rich, but I'm doing all right. I've worked hard for what I have, and I'm careful with my money because, frankly, I've seen too many people in my family lose everything over dumb decisions. Clorinda, however, has never been careful. She's been divorced twice, has 3 kids who are now grown, and seems to spend her life lurching from one crisis to another. We all know that one relative who always has a sob story, right? That's Clorinda. She's borrowed money from nearly everyone in the family at some point, and paying it back is never a priority for her. "I'll pay you back when I can," she always says, but somehow when I can never comes. So, when she came to me last year with her latest drama, I should have known better. But she played me like a damn fiddle. She showed up at my apartment out of the blue. I didn't even know she had my address, to be honest. She was crying, her face red and blotchy like she'd been at it for hours. She sat down on my couch, shaking her head, and said, "I didn't know where else to go." I asked her what was wrong, and that's when the story started. According to her, she was being evicted. She said she'd fallen behind on rent after her hours got cut at work, and her landlord wasn't willing to negotiate. She told me she only had a couple of weeks before she and her youngest son, Rory, would be out on the street. And then, for the kicker, she said Rory had been sick and needed medical care, which had wiped out what little savings she had. Now, I'm not heartless. Whatever my feelings about Clorinda's past mistakes, I wasn't going to let her and Rory end up homeless. She asked me for $10,000 to pay off her back rent and secure a new place to live. She promised she'd pay me back as soon as things got better. I hesitated. $10,000 is no small amount of money, even for me. That's a huge chunk of savings, and I wasn't entirely sure I'd ever see it again. I asked her if she'd talked to anyone else in the family about helping her. She said no, claiming everyone else had turned their backs on her. She even threw in a guilt trip about how I was the only one in the family who could afford to help her. "You've done so well for yourself," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Please, I'm begging you." Looking back, there were so many red flags. For one, she didn't have any proof of her situation, no eviction notices, no medical bills, nothing. Just her word and those crocodile tears. But at the time, I didn't think about that. I just thought about Rory and the possibility of them sleeping in a car. I thought, if I don't help them, who will? So, I told her I'd do it. I went to the bank the next day and withdrew $10,000 in cash. Why cash? Because she claimed her landlord only accepted cash payments. I handed her the money in an envelope, and she gave me this big, teary hug. "You have no idea what this means to me," she said. "I'll never forget this." 2 months went by, and I didn't hear much from her. I figured she was busy getting her life back together, and honestly, I wasn't too concerned. I'd done what I thought was right, and I didn't expect her to pay me back anytime soon. But then I saw something that made my blood boil. I was scrolling through Facebook one night when I came across a post that stopped me in my tracks. It was Clorinda, standing in front of a brand new house, grinning from ear to ear. The caption read, "New beginnings. So excited for this next chapter in my life. #blessed #dream, house." I stared at the post for a good 5 minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. I clicked through her profile, looking for any context that would make this make sense. But nope, there it was, plain as day. She'd bought a house. I was furious. I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. I texted her, "What is going on? How did you buy a house? I thought you were broke." No response. The next day, I called her again, and this time she picked up. I didn't even say hello. I went straight to it. "Clorinda, what the hell is going on? You told me you were about to get evicted. You said you had no money. And now you're buying a house?" She didn't even try to deny it. She just laughed and said, "Oh, that. My situation improved. It's none of your business how I spend my money." None of my business? Are you kidding me? I told her she needed to pay me back immediately, but she just laughed again and said, "Good luck with that," before hanging up on me. That's when I realized I'd been played. She had used me, and she didn't even have the decency to feel bad about it. I sat there, fuming, thinking about all the times I'd heard stories about her taking advantage of people. This time, she'd crossed the line. She didn't just take money, she took my trust, my kindness, and my faith in family. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. So, I started digging. I called up a few cousins who were closer to Clorinda and asked them what they knew. Turns out, she'd been bragging about the house to everyone except me. One cousin told me Clorinda had been saving up for months to buy it, long before she ever came to me with her sob story. Another cousin said she'd been working extra hours, not fewer, and had even gotten a raise at work. I started piecing it all together. She hadn't been broke. She'd lied about everything, the eviction, Rory's health, all of it. And she'd used my $10,000 as the down payment on her shiny new house. But she hadn't bought it in her name. She'd put it in Rory's name, probably to keep it off her records in case someone like me came looking for answers. I was furious, but I wasn't going to let her win. I knew I needed a plan, and I was ready to play dirty. After I found out the truth, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. She thought she could take my money, lie to me, and walk away without consequences? Not on my watch. I started coming up with a plan to make her regret ever thinking she could scam me. First, I gathered all the evidence. I saved screenshots of her Facebook posts showing off the new house. I printed out our text conversations, especially the ones where she asked for the money and promised to pay me back. I even got statements from 2 cousins who were willing to confirm that she'd been bragging about using family money for her down payment. Then I filed a claim in small claims court. I wasn't sure I'd win, but I figured it was worth a shot. I showed up to court with my folder of evidence, ready to fight. Clorinda, of course, played the victim. She cried and told the judge that I had misunderstood the situation and that the money was a gift, not a loan. But the judge wasn't buying it, especially after I showed the texts where she'd promised to pay me back. The court ruled in my favor. She was ordered to pay me back the full $10,000, plus court fees. But I knew Clorinda well enough to know she wasn't going to write me a check anytime soon. That's when I decided to step things up. I remembered how she'd put the house in Rory's name. That gave me an idea. I reached out to Rory, who, by the way, is nothing like his mom. He's a good kid, just trying to get through college and avoid his mom's drama. I asked him if he knew that she'd used my money for the house. He had no idea. When I explained everything, he was horrified. He told me he didn't want to be involved in any of this and even offered to help me however he could. With his help, I found out more about the house. Clorinda had taken out a loan to cover most of the cost, but my money had been the crucial down payment. She hadn't told the bank or anyone else about her sketchy dealings. That gave me leverage. I tipped off the bank. I sent them all the evidence, including proof that she'd lied to get the down payment money. Banks don't like fraud, and they especially don't like people who misrepresent their finances. Within a few weeks, the bank started an investigation. Clorinda didn't know it yet, but her dream house was about to become a nightmare. While the bank was doing their thing, I made another move. I reported her to the IRS. I'd heard from family over the years that Clorinda wasn't exactly honest about her taxes. She'd been claiming all sorts of deductions she wasn't entitled to and underreporting her income to qualify for government assistance. I figured if she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her what real consequences look like. The IRS doesn't mess around. They started looking into her financial history, and it didn't take long for them to find problems. Turns out, she owed thousands in back taxes. Between the bank investigation and the IRS audit, Clorinda was completely overwhelmed. But I wasn't done yet. Clorinda always loved showing off on social media, so I decided to hit her where it hurt. I didn't want to stoop to her level, but I wanted the family to know the truth. I wrote a long post explaining everything, how she'd lied to me, scammed me, and used my money for her house. I included screenshots of our conversations and her Facebook posts as proof. The reaction was immediate. Family members started calling and texting me, furious at her. Even the ones who had always defended her couldn't believe what she'd done. Clorinda tried to spin the story, of course, claiming I was just jealous of her success. But the evidence was too clear. No one was buying her lies anymore. By the end of it all, Clorinda lost everything. The bank foreclosed on the house after finding out about the shady down payment. The IRS hit her with massive fines for tax fraud. She tried to keep her job, but her employer found out about the investigations and let her go. Even Rory moved out, wanting nothing to do with her mess. As for me, I got my money back. It wasn't easy, but between the court ruling and some of her assets being liquidated during the foreclosure, I eventually got every penny. The best part, though, wasn't the money, it was the satisfaction of knowing she couldn't use anyone else the way she used me. Clorinda's life is a wreck now. She's burned every bridge in the family, and no one trusts her anymore. She tried to reach out to me recently, claiming she wanted to make amends. I didn't respond. She made her bed, and now she can lie in it. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's to trust your gut. If someone's story doesn't add up, don't let guilt or family loyalty blind you. Some people will take advantage of you without a second thought. And if someone ever tells you, it's none of your business, make it your business. Story 2. The driveway wars began as most sibling disputes do, small, petty, and totally avoidable. My brother, Eustace, and I had been living under the same roof again after his second divorce. He'd moved back into our childhood home, which I never left because I'd inherited it after our parents passed. At first, it wasn't too bad having him around. But then, Eustace showed his true colors, as always. Eustace had this shiny black SUV, a massive gas guzzler that looked ridiculous for a man with no kids and nowhere important to go. Meanwhile, I had my tiny hatchback, old but reliable. The driveway at our house wasn't particularly wide or long. It could fit 2 cars side by side, but if someone parked behind, the person in front was trapped. This, apparently, was the perfect setup for Eustace's latest power play. It started one Monday morning. I had to leave for work, but there was Eustace's SUV, parked right behind my car. I knocked on his door, trying to keep my voice calm. "Eustace, can you move your car? I have to go." From inside, I heard him groan. "Hold on, Tilda, I'm eating breakfast." "Can't you move it now? I'm running late." He strolled out 10 minutes later, barely looking at me as he climbed into his car and backed out of the driveway. I was fuming but let it go. Everyone has their off days, right? The next day, though, it happened again. And the next. By the end of the week, it was clear, Eustace was parking behind me on purpose. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, "It's easier for me this way. You can wait a few minutes." A few minutes? I had a job. Responsibilities. But Eustace acted like my life revolved around his schedule. Every morning became a negotiation, me begging him to move his car, him acting like I was an unreasonable nag. The more I pushed, the more smug he became. One day, I tried to reason with him. "Eustace, can't you park in the street or pull up to the garage? It'd make things easier for both of us." "Nope," he said, lounging on the couch like a king. "The street's too far, and the garage is full of junk. Anyway, why are you making such a big deal out of this? Just wait until I'm ready." Wait? Wait? I was done waiting. The last straw came one Sunday morning. I was meeting a friend for brunch, and, as usual, Eustace had parked his SUV behind me. I knocked on his door, already knowing how this would go. "Eustace, move your car. I have to leave." From inside, he called, "Just wait until I'm done with my coffee." "Are you serious? I have plans." "Then wait." "Geez, Tilda, relax." That was it. Something inside me snapped. I marched outside, got into my hatchback, and pulled it around to park directly in front of the garage door. Eustace loved to sleep in on Sundays and usually didn't leave until the afternoon. Well, not today. I left the car there, locked it, and went to brunch. I even lingered longer than usual, ordering an extra coffee just to drag it out. By the time I got home, Eustace's SUV was still boxed in, and he was waiting for me on the porch, pacing like a madman. "What the hell, Tilda?" he barked the moment I stepped out of my car. "Oh, hey," I said, pretending not to notice his mood. "What's up?" "You parked in front of the garage. I couldn't leave all morning." "Oh no," I said, faking concern. "You should have just asked me to move it. I would have come right back." He glared at me, his face red. "You know I needed to go out." "Did I?" I said sweetly. "Well, now you know how it feels." I thought he was going to explode, but instead, he stormed back into the house and slammed the door. Victory, at least for that day, was mine. But Eustace wasn't the kind of guy to let things slide. Over the next few weeks, our feud escalated. He started parking even closer to my car, sometimes blocking me in on both sides just to make it harder for me to leave. I retaliated by parking in inconvenient spots, sometimes taking up the best part of the driveway so he had to walk farther to the house. Our parents' old neighbors started noticing. One of them, Mrs. Crawford, even pulled me aside one day. "Is everything all right between you and Eustace? I've been hearing some shouting." "Oh, we're fine," I lied. "Just a little sibling disagreement." But inside, I was furious. Why did I have to be the reasonable one? Eustace was the problem, not me. Every time I tried to talk to him about it, he brushed me off or laughed in my face. The breaking point came one night when I got home late from work. It had been a long, exhausting day, and all I wanted to do was park, go inside, and collapse into bed. But when I pulled into the driveway, there it was, Eustace's SUV, blocking me in completely. He'd parked at an angle, taking up both spots in the driveway. My hatchback wouldn't fit anywhere. I honked my horn, hoping he'd come out and move it. Nothing. I texted him. No reply. Finally, I stomped inside and found him on the couch, headphones in, watching a movie. "Eustace," I shouted. "Move your car." He looked up, annoyed. "Later." "Not later. Now." "Geez, Tilda, you're so dramatic. Just park in the street." "I'm not parking in the street," I yelled, completely losing it. "This is my house, too." He smirked. "Then wait until I'm done." I stood there, seething, before storming back outside. If Eustace thought he could walk all over me, he had another thing coming. I was done being polite. I was done playing nice. And I was about to make him regret every smug, entitled thing he'd ever done. I sat in my car that night, gripping the steering wheel and staring at Eustace's obnoxiously large SUV blocking the driveway. My heart was pounding with rage, but for once, I wasn't going to just let it go. I'd had enough. If Eustace wanted a war, then that's exactly what he was going to get. I decided to bide my time. Over the next few days, I watched him, paying attention to his patterns. He was predictable, always leaving for his part-time job around 8 a.m. and coming back around 4 p.m. His precious SUV, however, was his baby. He parked it the same way every night, directly behind me, smug as ever. But I noticed something else. Eustace had been bragging to a friend on the phone about an important client meeting he had coming up. If he couldn't make that meeting, it would apparently wreck the deal of the year. Interesting. The night before his big meeting, I put my plan into action. I waited until Eustace had gone to bed, which wasn't hard because the man snored like a freight train. By 10 p.m. I grabbed my keys and carefully moved my hatchback, parking it exactly where his SUV would need to exit the driveway. I positioned it so close to the garage door that there was no way he could get around it without calling a tow truck or getting me to move it. But I wasn't going to be around to move it. The next morning, I got up early and left the house before Eustace was awake. I parked my car at a friend's house 2 blocks away, then went out for breakfast at a diner where no one would find me. My phone was on silent, tucked away in my purse as I ordered pancakes and coffee. I wanted to enjoy my revenge in peace. By the time I checked my phone, Eustace had called me 15 times. His texts were a glorious mix of rage and desperation. Move your car now. Tilda, this isn't funny. I'm going to be late. If you don't come back, I swear I'm calling the police. I smiled to myself, picturing him pacing the driveway, running his hands through his hair like he always did when he was stressed. I imagined him trying to squeeze his SUV past my car, only to realize there was no way out. And then, oh, the icing on the cake, I pictured him missing that oh-so-important meeting he couldn't stop bragging about. When I finally got home around noon, Eustace was sitting on the porch, his face red with frustration. He looked like a man who had been humbled in the worst possible way. "What the hell, Tilda?" he shouted as soon as I got out of the car. "Do you know what you just cost me?" "Oh, were you late for something?" I asked innocently. "You should have just waited until I was ready to come back." His jaw dropped. "This is not the same thing." "Oh, isn't it?" I said, keeping my voice calm. "Because every single day for the last few months, you've made me late for work. You've made me rearrange my life just to deal with your selfish parking. And when I asked you to stop, you just laughed in my face. So maybe now you understand how it feels." Eustace opened his mouth to argue but stopped. He looked completely defeated. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Instead, he just shook his head and stomped back into the house. That night, Eustace moved his SUV to the street for the first time. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. From that day on, he never parked behind me again. In fact, our entire dynamic shifted after that. Eustace wasn't as smug or dismissive anymore. Maybe it was because he realized I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Or maybe it was because he knew I could, and would, play dirty if pushed. Either way, I finally got my driveway back. And as petty as it might sound, that small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. Sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't about yelling or fighting. Sometimes, it's about parking your car in just the right spot and letting karma do the rest. And let me tell you, karma fits perfectly in a hatchback.